Today, we're going to talk about, we've done some research with Ipsos Mori. So we're going to talk about that, about the results of that research, and then hopefully at the end, we'll have plenty of time for questions. You can ask me anything you like about technology, about strategy, omnichannel, social media, whatever that might contain. We've got over 10,000 customers in over 180 countries. And you'll see at the top there's 3 key disciplines that Verint works across: security intelligence, fraud risk and compliance, and the sexy sector that I'm going to talk about today, customer engagement optimization. The only piece that frankly really gets me going. But, you know, let's have a wander through. First of all, we'll talk about the research that we've done. So the surveys that we asked for were across, and as I said, we brought in Ipsos Mori to do this, but the sample was drawn across several countries: UK, US, Germany, Poland, Russia. We had 1,000 responses per country, and within that we looked at 7 top, what we consider to be sexy sectors that we work in all the time, and in terms of maturity of customer experience are probably about halfway up that maturity curve. The majority of them are. And we also brought in additional research of contact centres. We work a lot with contact centres across all different sectors, so we brought in some research for them. It was conducted back end of last year, so it's still nice and fresh. And the objectives of the surveys, 2 things really: to see what can be done to unlock more value, identify who are your champions of your brand, who are likely to spend more with you, and then what are the drivers behind that. So, you know, in terms of customer loyalties, there are several key drivers, and when we survey, we look to see if those drivers are actually changing and where each of those are trending. So we've got 2 types of surveys. We've got the UK business, and then on top of that, we surveyed their end customers as well. So we've got both sides of the spectrum. So let's have a look through. So the first question is, and we're trying to identify early warning systems, particularly to flag any high-risk issues. So we've got 2 questions here. Are customer complaints analysed? This is the first question, relatively easy one. You'll see the pie chart there. 88% of that is blue, so that's all. We're good to go. UK businesses at the moment are analysing their customer complaints. On the second chart, we've got, do you have a process in place allowing you to flag high-risk issues urgently? So whilst it doesn't look too bad, 77% say yes, we've got 23% that are either no or don't know, which actually in effect means no. So there's still quite a bit of work to be done in terms of identifying high-risk issues. Could be issues with VIP customers, for example, or it could be issues that are related to a health and safety or compliance issue, anything like that. Next one, companies recognise the importance of advocacy. So, how does your company define a good customer? And I work with lots of companies, and each of them has a slightly different methodology on how they define what a customer advocate might be. So this was an interesting question from my point of view, but typically the bottom 3 that I've identified and highlighted here, over 50% of them were looking at length of relationship, high overall total spend, and a recommendation of their services. Slightly disappointing for me, I think, was likely to advocate brand on social media and communicating regularly with us. And that's something that I want to go on to and explore a little bit further about the importance of engagement. And if a customer is engaging with you, surely that makes them an advocate. Why would they bother? Why would they tell you you're good or you're bad if they weren't actually interested? Omnichannel. Actually, before I'm going to roll on to the omnichannel, let's have a question. Can we roll up one of my questions there? And you need to be honest with this. As a company, we have a formal process for reviewing customer feedback from multiple sources with key business executives. Do you agree or disagree? So, in effect, and this is always the first question that I ask companies, is actually, do you have C-level sponsorship? Or the information, the insights that you're getting from your customers, where are they going? Are they going up to the executive level? So we've got agree, neither agree or disagree, disagree or don't know. Okay, so that's a fairly split decision there. So 45% say they agree that there's a formal process for reviewing customer feedback with key business executives, and 41% say disagree. Okay, interesting. So we'll take that thought going forward. So back into the omni-channel again. I'm spending, probably when I go in and see my clients and my prospects, I'm spending about 30 to 40% of my time talking about the omni-channel now. And we'll continue to do that because we know that the omni-channel is here to stay, and everything is revolving around it. So marketing plans are revolving around it, sales strategies are revolving around it. But not all channels are equal, I would say at this stage, both in terms of how we manage those channels, the technology that we put into those channels, the manpower that we put into each of those channels varies dramatically between all of these. Customer feedback surveys, that's a fairly easy one. That's a technology that you can implement. All you have to do is make sure you analyze the feedback on the back of it and take that back out to the business. Customer complaints, that's a relatively easy one as well. So what we're looking at here is which communication channels or sources do you refer to for your customer insight? And still today, we've got the bottom two, customer feedback surveys and customer complaints. They are the ones that companies are using to manage their insight and to drive decision-making within their organization. But if we look at social media, for example, we know that generally it's still got a relatively low engagement level from a customer perspective, but we need to think about that customer journey that has resulted to them going onto social media. And typically the work that I've done, looking at customer journeys, we're able to identify that social media is very often an escalation point, and it's transparent. So you can't ignore it. You ignore it at your peril. It means that that customer has potentially gone on the website, emailed in a query or complaint. They've then maybe gone to the contact center, not got the answer that they wanted there, and they'll then move into social media and they will vent on social media. So, as I say, I talk a lot about the omni-channel and about the importance of investment in the various channels, but I think in terms of how we drive that insight back into the business, all of those channels are equally relevant, and we need to start building them into that insight gathering mix. So, different approaches to customer insight. How do you use customer insights within your organization? So from the surveys that we did, again, we've got two at the bottom here, which you probably would expect. So we use our insights to share findings with other departments, or we use it to support agent training. That's fairly straightforward, and that's certainly what you would expect. The third one up here, provide feedback to customers. This is an interesting one, and I've highlighted it for two reasons. So it comes between 60 and 70%, which you think, that's a fair assumption. I'm not actually sure, when I talk to my prospects, my customers, I'm not sure how that number is as big as that. Because I think if we're all honest here today, and I'm going to ask you in a minute, if we're all honest here today, how many of us ask our customers for feedback, bring that back in, do something with it, and then go back out to that customer base and tell them what you've done? So the second side of the survey piece are the UK consumers. So we're now delving beyond the businesses into their end customers. So let's see what they've got to say. 3 key findings that I'm going to dig into a little bit. Customers are broadly happy, but less than a third feel valued. 13% of consumers are activated as brand champions, and this, remember, comes from the customer, so they think they're a champion. So whether they are or not, is actually irrelevant, but the customer thinks they are. It just so happens that it does match up with the business perspective as well, but it might not have. Businesses reward champions most, but could do more. One key piece in there, 36% of champions receive awards as thank yous. And I'm going to delve into a bit more detail. So that's all very well. You're a great customer, thanks very much, here's your gift. But what about those that are great customers that haven't engaged with you haven't really identified yet? So let's have a look. We're going to talk about the happy factor for a second. We've talked about that a lot today. How happy are our consumers? In general, I'm happy overall with the service I receive from organisations like these. So these are my 7 sexy sectors, not easy to say on a Monday afternoon, and that I've pulled out. So we have those that agree, top 2, home broadband provider, mobile phone provider, and we've also got a nice credit card provider result there. And at the bottom of that, we've got utilities and insurance, and we'll talk about that in a second. So from a territory perspective then, let's look at these results. So from a happiness and complaints levels, this is a lovely slide. So UK. So we know that the UK is broadly happy, but at the same time, it's less likely to complain. So we've got only 22% of customers that complain several times a year. So the only country that beats us there is Germany. So the Germans actually complain less than we do, which is bizarre, I think, but we'll move on. Don't suffer in silence. So now we're starting to understand, we know how happy you are, we know what sectors you're more happy with than other sectors, but tell us how often you complain to these sectors. So we've got the winners here, credit card providers, insurance providers, mobile phone providers, and then across the bottom, we've got home phone, landline providers, and utilities. So let's talk about, in a little bit more depth, about the activities behind those numbers. So on the top line, and you probably can't read this, I'm going to read it for you. I have told friends and family when I experience good service. And across the top there, we've got sectors. Key sector for telling friends and family that you've had good service is mobile sector. 24% of those customers have told friends and family. Almost equally, home broadband, 23% again. And we would expect that from the insight that we've previously got, frankly. Bank's not too bad, 18%. What about when I've received bad service? Do I tell friends and family? Well, certainly home telephone and mobile, yeah. So mobile, you talk about whether it's good or bad. It's a hot topic with friends and family, something you feel quite free to talk about. And also banks as well. We talk about those. And again, home broadband and utilities we talk about. So we've all heard from friends and families bad experience stories. And that's pretty much followed out with the research that we've had. Another interesting piece. I changed providers because I found the same thing for cheaper elsewhere. Now, if we thought about it, we could probably think, yeah, I know what sectors those are going to be. Those are going to be insurance, because it makes sense, because brand new customers generally get better offers, don't they? And it's an opportunity when your renewal comes over, it's an opportunity to look back at the market, it's easy to change, etc. So certainly, we've got insurance providers at 24%, but then also utilities. Again, we know how easy it is now to switch utilities. Once you can work out how you read your bill, which takes you 10 days, you invest that 10 days, you know where you are, then the switching process is relatively easy beyond that. So there's a lot of churning for price in those two sectors. And then finally at the bottom, I've written online reviews about the service provider or retailer. Very small. Customers generally don't write a lot of online reviews, and this isn't social media, this is literally the online reviews that you'll see. So I'm going to ask you a second question now, if you can bring that up please, guys. So customers were asked to indicate the extent to which they agreed to this statement. Providing feedback to service providers or retailers directly is pointless, as I don't think they take action on it. How do you think they responded? Agree. Okay, so we believe that our customers think it's pointless, which, you know, we're all sitting here today and we've been working on this problem for probably the last 3 or 4 years, much more intensively now, but we still realize there's a long way to go in terms of that maturity curve that you'll see Bruce Temkin and co talk about. We're not even halfway. If we're not going back to our customers and actually telling them about the changes that we're making, we're not even halfway. So let's continue. UK customers feel least valued. So generally, I feel valued as a customer by the service providers that I've used. So we've pulled this out into territories. I think, again, it makes quite interesting reading. So 29% in the UK agree that they feel valued. So that's a relatively small number. It's the smallest number of all, which is surprising. But nevertheless, for broadly happy customers, they certainly don't feel valued. Let's talk about churn for a second. And again, it's something I spend quite a lot of time talking to my customers about. And churn it's an issue in terms of, well, it can be an issue, but sometimes it can also be a blessing. So I work with companies with large retention operations that cost a lot of money to maintain, both in terms of technology, in terms of manpower, in terms of process, management, all those good things. So is it really worth it? Let's have a look at the churn. So we've done this again by my 7 sexy sectors. Insurance providers have a 25% churn over less than a year. So that's pretty high. Utilities, 13%, again, pretty high. Banks, we all know, relatively low. So, but if we take it as an average, on average, 27% have been with providers for less than 2 years. So I'm sure you all know about your churn rates, and you probably have gone into quite a lot of granular detail about churn. But as businesses in the UK, we aren't necessarily great at understanding what drives churn and managing that churn once it occurs. What we've been able to do is, through our survey responses, we've broken it down. So everybody segments, hopefully, in their organisations. Some use personas, some might use a business metric like Net Promoter Score or CSAT, or they might look at other metrics that are purpose-built for them. But what we've done is we've extrapolated customer types. We've pulled out brand champions at 13% from this data, and the brand champions are happy or very happy with the service. 5% of them have written online reviews. They follow brands on social media. They generally spend more, happier customers. Interesting section that we have next is silent likers. And I spend quite a lot of time working with companies, helping them to understand how to find their silent likers, analysing their data so that we can see actually it's not necessarily about engagement, although that's a strong indicator. What we have with the silent likers, they're very happy, and often just as happy as the brand champions, but you won't know about it because they don't really say, they don't engage, they don't give you good feedback, they don't really complain either. 76% of silent likers have never complained, in fact. So actually, if we add that up, that's 43% of really strong business that you've got, but you've only got 13% where your champions are being treated like champions, and very often they're getting champion-type offers and rewards, etc. Those silent likers are kind of very often forgotten. Fence sitters, we've identified these as 16% of those survey respondents. So they're ambivalent about service. They typically don't complain a lot. 53% of those never complain as well. But they don't share good or bad experiences, and only 2% have followed providers on social media. But again, not a bad customer to have. They don't talk about you badly on social media or anything like that. So again, if you add your 13%, your 30%, and your 16%, you've still got a relatively strong customer base that you can work with. What I find when I go out to organisations is that companies spend a lot of time with churners. Some of those churners we're able to segment, and we can understand that actually they will churn because of price, or there's a constant reason why they will churn. And there comes a point where you say, actually, I'm going to accept that level of churn because I know those customers will come back in 1 or 2 years anyway. But also, what we need to be careful about with churners is the way that we manage them, because they are twice as likely to talk about as bad experiences with friends and family over good ones. Equally, only 5% receive rewards from service providers as thank yous. So what does this mean? And I'm not going to read all of it verbatim, but 85% of the brand champions stay with the same providers for 3 years or more. So you've got some good, strong levels of loyalty there. And also, silent likers, 68% have been with their providers for more than 3 years. Fence sitters, again, good longevity, 2 years plus, 59%. Churners, 44% been with current providers for less than 2 years. 30% of those have changed service providers in favour of cheaper alternatives. So what we need to do is be able to segment these however you decide to do your segmentation, but understand what are the drivers of loyalty for each of those sectors and then work with those. So my key takeaways from this is it's always about building a unified voice of the customer analytics strategy. And that's what I do and my team does on a day-to-day basis. So we'll go into organisations, we'll look at your customer journeys, but it won't be about the technology. It's never about the technology. In fact, when I go in, it's technology agnostic because it's about the business and about the customers within that business. What are those virtual SLAs that you've got on your omni-channel? So whereby if somebody sends you a message by email, a complaint or an inquiry by email, typically how long does it take you to get back to that customer? And what does the customer expect? How quickly does that customer expect? So I work on shrinking the gap between the customer's expectations and the current business performance across the omnichannel, and I can do that easily with customer analytics. Second piece, make sure you know your churners from your brand champions. Align customer insight with business process improvements. So with the best will in the world, and there's some great technology out in the corridor there for you to look at that will bring you in some beautiful insights about your customers. But if you don't have the strategy behind that to be able to bring that insight in, send it to the relevant departments, but make sure that it's acted on, and then once you've done that, you go out to the customers and say, you told us this, we did this, does it work? Once that customer comes back to you and says, yes, it does, that's the point where you can close the loop. Never before. Lots of customers come to me and they say, well, you know, we've got closed loop analysis on this because we understand what the problem was and we fixed it. But we haven't actually gone back to the customer and told them that we fixed it, and that customer hasn't come back to us and said, yeah, you fixed it. So there's still quite a long way to go in terms of what the business perceives to be good service and what the customer from an outside-in perspective perceives to be good. And then finally, demonstrating continuously that you're listening to and acting on what your customer's saying. So again, it's just all about reaching back out to the customers and tell them what you are doing.